Cop pulls gun at black woman, laughs at her FBI badge. 2 minutes later, he's in cuffs. The night air hung thick with the promise of rain, the sky bruised with heavy clouds. The highway stretched endlessly, the faint glow of distant headlights flickering like dying stars. Halle Berry's black Chevrolet Malibu sputtered to a halt, its engine groaning before surrendering completely. The dashboard flickered, dead. She exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. This wasn't the night to be stranded. Not here. Not now. She reached for her phone, her thumb hovering over the power button. No signal. A cold smirk crossed her face. Course. Fate always had a cruel sense of humor. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Empty road. Nothing but shadows and silence. She checked her surroundings again, instinct sharpening her senses. Years of training had conditioned her to see danger before it made itself known. The distant hum of an engine broke the quiet, faint at first, then growing louder. Headlights crested the hill behind her. A single patrol car. Her pulse remained steady, but her mind began running calculations. A lone cop on a deserted road could be salvation, or something far worse. Her fingers traced the edge of her leather jacket, feeling the reassuring weight of her badge tucked inside. The patrol car rolled to a stop behind her, its red and blue lights washing over the asphalt. The door opened slowly. Out stepped Officer Daniels, tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. His hand rested on his holster, even though she hadn't moved. "Evenin', ma'am," he drawled, his voice thick with false politeness. "Car trouble." Halle kept her expression neutral, her hands in plain sight on the steering wheel. "Looks that way." Daniel's eyes flicked over her, quick, assessing. His gaze lingered a beat too long. He shifted his stance, widening his legs just enough to show he was in control. The game had begun, and he didn't even know he was playing. License and registration. Her heart remained steady, but there was a flicker, the first crack in his performance. He hadn't asked what the problem was. He hadn't offered help. He was looking for a reason, any reason, to escalate. Halle's fingers moved slowly, retrieving her wallet from the glove compartment. Her badge slipped into view, its gold crest catching the light. "BI." Daniel's grin twitched. His eyes narrowed. For half a second, she saw the gears turning behind his eyes. Then he laughed, a low, mean chuckle that echoed through the empty night. "You gotta be kiddin' me." He leaned against the car, his hand still resting on his weapon. What'd they do? Start handing those out in cereal boxes now. Halle's fingers curled tight around the wallet, the insult flicking against her like a match against stone. She kept her face impassive, her training burying the anger deep. This was the part that always came. The disbelief, the casual dismissal, the little games of humiliation. "I'm on assignment," she said evenly. "Badge number 08257. You can radio it in if you'd like." Daniel's grin stretched wider, teeth flashing beneath the harsh lights. He tapped his radio twice but didn't call it in. The message was clear. He didn't believe her, and he didn't need to check. His fingers drummed against his holster, slow and deliberate. "You know, I could take you in right now," he mused, as if considering it for the first time. "Impersonating a federal officer is a felony. Wouldn't want you getting yourself in trouble, sweetheart." Halle's jaw clenched. Sweetheart. There it was, the power play wrapped in condescension. He was testing her, trying to make her flinch. But she didn't. "Not yet." "Go ahead," she said, her voice like glass. "Call it in." Daniel's grin faltered, just for a second. He glanced back at his cruiser, weighing the options. The radio crackled on his hip, a ghost in the silence. He wouldn't call it in. Not yet. Not while he still thought he could break her down first. Instead, his hand slid to his gun, the motion lazy, almost casual. The metallic click echoed through the night as he unclipped the holster. "Step out of the car." Halle's heart thudded once, heavy and slow, not from fear but calculation. The first move had been made. The board was set. But what Daniels didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that she had been waiting for this moment. She had been waiting for him. Her fingers brushed the edge of her badge again, the microchip embedded beneath the gold. The recording had already started. Before I go on, I know you are enjoying the story, so I would really appreciate it if you give this video a like. Smash the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever I drop a new video. Alright, let's continue. The night air carried the weight of something unseen, thick, charged, waiting to snap. Halle Berry's fingers flexed against the door handle, the cool metal grounding her in the moment. She could feel Officer Daniels' eyes slicing into her, measuring every breath, every twitch. His hand hovered near his gun, the leather holster creaking under the pressure of his fingers. "Step out of the car." His voice was a low growl now, the mask of politeness slipping from his face like water off glass. Halle moved slowly, letting the moment stretch. Her heartbeat was steady, calculated. Years of fieldwork had taught her that panic was a weapon wielded by the weak. Daniels was expecting fear, expecting submission. But she knew something he didn't. Control was a delicate game, and the one who appeared calm always had the upper hand. The door creaked open, slicing through the night. Her boots touched the pavement, heels clicking against the cracked asphalt. She stood tall, shoulders squared, every inch of her radiating quiet authority. The wind tugged at her curls, carrying the faint scent of rain. Daniels smirked, but the edges of it were brittle now. He hadn't expected her to move with such purpose. His fingers twitched against his holster, eyes flicking to the badge still clipped to her belt. The weight of her authority hung between them, unseen but undeniable. "Hands where I can see 'em," he barked, trying to regain control. Halle obeyed, lifting her hands slowly. But there was no fear in her movements, only precision. The recording chip embedded in her badge was still running, capturing every word, every breath. Every second that ticked by was another nail in Daniels' coffin. "You really want to do this?" Her voice was calm, measured. Daniels' smirk widened, too wide. The kind of smile that hid something venomous beneath. He took a step closer, boots crunching over gravel. "What I want," he drawled, circling her like a predator, "is for you to shut that pretty mouth and let me do my job." Halle's jaw clenched, but she kept her eyes locked on him. The game was shifting. He was baiting her now, testing the edges of her restraint. Her mind catalogued every detail, the way his hand lingered near his weapon, the sweat glistening along his brow, the flicker of uncertainty behind his eyes. "Funny," she said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "I thought your job was to protect and serve." Daniels' grin flickered, just for a heartbeat, a crack in the armor. He didn't like the way she spoke. Didn't like how she refused to shrink beneath him. His fingers curled tighter around his holster. "You got a smart mouth on you." His voice was lower now, venom laced beneath every syllable. Halle's pulse remained steady, but beneath the surface, her muscles coiled, ready. She could feel the weight of the gun strapped to her thigh beneath her leather jacket, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. The moment hadn't ripened. Instead, she took half a step forward, just enough to make him feel the shift in power. Just enough to let him know she wasn't afraid. "You don't want to do this," she murmured, voice low and steady. "Call it in. Badge number 08257. Do it now, and we both walk away." For a moment, the night stretched thin between them, a wire pulled taut, waiting to snap. Daniels' eyes flicked toward his radio, uncertainty flickering behind the bravado. He could feel the shift too. He just didn't know how deep it ran. But the smirk returned, sharp and cruel. "I don't take orders from fake agents." His voice was louder now, filling the empty night. "You're just another liar trying to play dress-up." Halle's fingers curled tighter at her sides. Every insult was another crack in the mask he wore, every sneer another sign that he was slipping. But she didn't bite. Not yet. The clock was still ticking. Pop the trunk. His voice snapped through the air like a whip. Halle's heart gave a single hard thud, but she kept her face blank. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment that would tip the scales. Her mind raced through the contents of the trunk, the black briefcase, the encrypted files, the recording device still running. "You don't want to do that," she warned softly. Daniel's grin only stretched wider. He thought he was winning. "Trunk. Now." Halle's fingers twitched toward the keys clipped to her belt. She moved slowly, deliberately, not out of fear, but to make sure every second dripped into the recording. The key slipped into the lock, the trunk clicking open with a hollow pop. Daniels leaned forward, his breath sharp and shallow. He was hungry now, hungry for whatever power he thought was hidden inside. His fingers hovered over his gun, his eyes flicking between Halle and the dark interior of the trunk. Then he saw the black briefcase. A spark of triumph flickered behind his eyes. "What we got here?" His voice was a low purr now, like a man certain he'd found what he was looking for. Halle didn't answer. Her breath stayed steady, her eyes fixed on his hands. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. Daniels reached for the briefcase, fingers curling around the handle. Halle's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Daniels froze, his grin faltering. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, something uncertain. Halle took a slow step forward, her voice soft but razor-sharp. "That case is federal property. Tampering with it is obstruction of justice. 5 years minimum." Daniel's smirk wavered. He glanced at the case, then back at her. The balance was shifting beneath his feet, and he knew it. But pride was a stubborn beast. "You really expect me to believe that?" He sneered, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Halle's smile was slow, dangerous. "I don't expect you to believe anything." Her eyes locked onto his. "I expect you to call it in." The words hung heavy in the night. For a second, neither of them moved. The highway stretched out behind them, empty, endless. Then the radio on Daniel's hip crackled to life. "Unit 341, status check. Officer Daniels, come in." Halle's smile widened, just enough for him to see. The clock was still ticking, and he didn't even know it was counting down. Before I go on, I know you are enjoying the story, so I would really appreciate it if you give this video a like. Smash the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever I drop a new video. Alright, let's continue. The radio's crackle sliced through the night like a blade against glass, but Officer Daniels didn't reach for it. His fingers hovered near his gun instead, sweat glistening along the ridge of his brow. The briefcase sat heavy in his hand, the weight of it pressing against the moment. Unspoken, unseen, but undeniable. The night seemed to fold in on itself, every second stretching thinner, tighter. Halle Berry's breath remained steady, but her pulse drummed beneath the surface, a silent rhythm only she could hear. Her mind ran through the sequence. 3 steps forward, disarm. 2 seconds to pin him. 10 to cuff him. But not yet. Not until she had everything she needed. Unit 341, status check. Officer Daniels, come in. The radio crackled again, louder this time. A lifeline dangling in the air, but he ignored it. Daniel's grin had curdled at the edges, his arrogance beginning to crack. He could feel the shift, even if he couldn't name it. His thumb tapped the side of the briefcase, the sound hollow against the hard surface. "You talk a lot for someone in cuffs," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Halle's smile was a slow, dangerous curve. "I'm not in cuffs." "Not yet." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the trunk again, then back to her. His hand twitched on his holster, a nervous tick he'd been trying to bury. He thought he had control, but the cracks were widening, and Halle was watching every fracture splinter. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he sneered. Halle's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "I don't have to think, Officer Daniels. I know." The grin slipped, just a flicker, but she caught it. The game was shifting faster now. His own arrogance was turning against him, binding him tighter with every word. He couldn't feel it yet, but she could. You think that little badge makes you untouchable? His voice was louder now, filling the empty night. Like if he could make enough noise, he could drown out the doubt creeping into his bones. Halle took half a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. The heat of his breath hung in the narrow space between them. No. Her voice was low, steady. But the wire in my badge. That makes you recorded. The silence that followed was absolute. Thick, heavy, swallowing everything. For a second Daniels didn't move. Didn't blink. The smirk evaporated, leaving something raw behind, something uglier. Halle watched the realization bloom behind his eyes. Low. Reluctant. He glanced down at the badge clipped to her belt, the faint glint of the embedded microchip catching the light. His breath hitched just a flicker, but she heard it. You lianda. His voice was quieter now, but there was something frayed beneath the bravado. Try me. Halle's smile didn't waver. Her heart beat steady, slow, counting down the seconds. Daniel's hand clenched tighter around the briefcase, knuckles white against the handle. He was calculating now, trying to claw back control. His eyes flicked to the radio, then back to her. Two choices. Call it in or bury it. Halle could see the war waging behind his eyes. Unit 341, status check. The radio crackled again. Daniel's fingers twitched. He was running out of time and he knew it. Go ahead, Halle murmured, voice soft enough to slice through the silence. Answer it. Daniel's nostrils flared, the last fraying threads of his ego pulling tight. His hand jerked toward the radio, but stopped just short. His own fear betrayed him. If he answered, he gave her power. If he didn't, he sealed his own fate. Checkmate. Halle's voice was a whisper now, coiled and deadly. You think you're the first dirty cop I've dealt with? You think you're the smartest? Daniel's jaw clenched, the muscles jumping beneath his skin. He was unraveling, slowly, painfully, and she was letting him. I could shoot you right now, he spat, the words clumsy on his tongue. Nobody would question it. Halle's smile sharpened, cutting through the dark. Except the agents listening in. Daniel's breath caught, a sharp, involuntary hitch. He glanced around, eyes darting to the shadows like he could see the wire pulsing in the air. There was nothing. Only the dark. Only her. But the seed had been planted. You lion, he whispered again, but there was no weight behind the words now. Halle leaned in, close enough that he could feel the heat of her breath against his ear. You sure about that? The silence stretched tight, suffocating. Daniel's hand twitched toward his gun again, but this time the motion was slower, unsure. Go ahead. Halle's voice was velvet wrapped around a blade. Make your move. Daniel's breath quickened. He was drowning in the weight of the night, the weight of her gaze pressing down on him. His own arrogance had walked him into the trap, and now the jaws were closing. Unit 341, status check. The radio crackled one final time. Halle's smile was razor-sharp. You're out of time, Officer Daniels. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the distant growl of engines cut through the silence, low and steady, slicing through the dark. Headlights crested the hill behind them, two black SUVs rolling slow and deliberate. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. His fingers twitched on his holster. Halle's voice was a whisper against the night. Told you to call it in. The SUVs rolled to a stop, doors clicking open in perfect unison. Men in black suits stepped out, weapons holstered, badges glinting beneath the harsh lights. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Halle leaned back, her eyes glittering beneath the red and blue glow. 2 minutes, she murmured. That's all you had. The clock had run out. And now the game was hers. The low rumble of the black SUVs settled into a heavy silence, their engines cutting out one by one. The night stretched around them, thick, breathless, as if the very air was waiting to see how this would play out. The doors clicked open in perfect sync, and two agents stepped out, their suits crisp, their expressions carved from stone. Halle didn't flinch, didn't glance away from Officer Daniels. She stood perfectly still, her breath measured, the weight of the moment pressing into her chest. Daniels' hand still hovered near his gun, knuckles white against the leather strap. Sweat beaded along his temple, his chest rising and falling too fast beneath the fabric of his uniform. "Last chance," Halle murmured, her voice a low current beneath the silence. "Call it in. Or let them do it for you." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the agents. He was calculating, trying to claw back control, but there was none left. He could feel it now, the noose tightening around his neck. The SUVs hadn't arrived by accident. They'd been waiting, watching. Halle had played him from the start. "You set me up," Daniels hissed, but there was no venom behind the accusation, only panic. Halle's smile was slow, cutting. "No, Officer Daniels. You set yourself up." The agents approached in measured steps, their faces unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. One of them, tall, black with salt and pepper hair, glanced at Halle without breaking stride. "Everything okay here, Agent Berry?" Daniels' breath caught. The title hit him like a bullet. His gaze snapped to Halle, wide with disbelief. He'd been so certain she was lying, so certain she was just another black woman trying to play tough. Now the truth was swallowing him whole. Halle's smile didn't waver. "Just wrapping things up," she said smoothly, never breaking eye contact with Daniels. "This officer was about to call in my badge number." Daniels' mouth opened, then closed. His mind was scrambling, searching for a way out, but there was none. The wire was still recording. The briefcase was still in his hand. Every insult, every threat, every breath. All of it logged. Unit 341, status check. The radio crackled again on his hip, louder now. Impatient. Daniel's fingers twitched toward the radio, but Halle's voice sliced through the silence. "Go on," she whispered. "Answer it." The two agents stopped a few paces away, hands resting on their hips. They didn't reach for their weapons. Not yet. They didn't have to. The power had already shifted, and everyone knew it. Daniel's face was slick with sweat now, his chest heaving beneath the weight of his own arrogance. His fingers fumbled for the radio, static hissing as he pressed the button. "Unit 341. His voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Status, clear." Halle's smile sharpened, slow, dangerous. "Louder." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the agents again, then back to her. His hand trembled on the radio. "Status, clear," he repeated, louder this time. The radio crackled. "Copy that, 341. The line went dead. Halle took a slow step forward, her boots clicking against the asphalt. The night seemed to press closer, wrapping around them like a vice. "You should have called it in the first time," she murmured. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His fingers twitched near his gun, but they both knew he wouldn't draw it. Not now. Not with witnesses. Halle leaned in close, close enough that only he could hear. "You want to know what the wire picked up?" Her voice was a velvet blade against his ear. "Everything." Daniels flinched, his pulse visible beneath the sheen of sweat along his neck. His eyes darted to the agents again, two silent shadows waiting for the signal. Halle's smile was pure poison. "Threatening a federal agent. That's 5 years. Tampering with evidence. Another 10. She tilted her head, her eyes glinting in the dark. "But you know what really gets them." Daniels swallowed hard, his breath shallow. "Obstruction of justice," she whispered. 20 years, minimum." His face paled, the weight of it crashing down all at once. The briefcase felt heavier in his hand now, heavier than the gun at his hip, heavier than the badge pinned to his chest. "You lion," he croaked, but the fight was already gone from his voice. Halle's smile never wavered. "Try me." The words hung between them, razor-sharp and final. Daniel's hand slipped from his holster, fingers trembling at his sides. He knew he'd lost. He just hadn't realized how thoroughly she'd beaten him until this very moment. Halle leaned back, letting the silence stretch. "You gonna cuff him?" the salt and pepper agent asked, his voice cutting through the night. Halle's eyes stayed locked on Daniel's. "No." Her voice was soft, steady. "He's gonna cuff himself." For a long moment, Daniels didn't move. The weight of the night pressed down on him, suffocating. His breath hitched, once, twice, before his shaking hands finally reached for the cuffs on his belt. The metal clinked against the silence as he locked them around his own wrists, the cold bite of steel snapping shut. Halle's smile was razor-thin. "Smart man." The agent stepped forward, taking him by the arms without a word. Daniels didn't resist. He couldn't. The fight had been drained from him, bled out by his own arrogance. Halle bent down slowly, her fingers closing around the handle of the briefcase. The black leather was cool beneath her touch, the lock still sealed tight. "Federal property," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. She straightened, watching as the agents guided Daniels toward the waiting SUVs. He didn't look back. "Guess they don't hand out badges in cereal boxes after all," she called after him. Daniels flinched, but he kept walking. The door slammed shut behind him. The engine growled to life. Then the SUVs melted back into the night, leaving only the echo of their departure. Halle stood alone beneath the bruised sky, the briefcase clutched tight in her hand. The highway stretched empty before her, a long, endless ribbon cutting through the dark. Her heart finally began to slow, the adrenaline fading. But the weight in her chest remained, heavy, constant, because this was never just about one dirty cop. It was about the next one. And the one after that. Halle glanced down at her badge, the tiny light still blinking beneath the gold crest. The wire had caught everything. Tomorrow Daniels would be the headline. But tonight, Halle Berry had reminded the world exactly who she was. And she was just getting started. The night air wrapped around Halle like a second skin, the distant hum of the SUVs fading into the shadows. She stood at the edge of the highway, her heartbeat settling into a steady rhythm beneath her ribcage. The briefcase hung from her hand, heavier now, not from its contents, but from what it represented. Proof. The kind that could bury men like Officer Daniels. Not just one crooked cop, but an entire system built on corruption, hidden in plain sight. Halle's mind sharpened as she replayed the night, every detail catalogued and stored. The trembling edge in Daniel's voice. The sweat slicking his forehead. The way his eyes had darted toward the trunk, betraying what he didn't want her to see. He thought he'd had her cornered. Another woman too scared to fight back. He hadn't seen her coming. A slow breath filled her lungs, steadying the storm beneath her surface. The briefcase rattled slightly in her grip, the metal clasps reflecting the faint flicker of moonlight. Whatever was inside would crack this case wide open, but she wouldn't open it here, not under the weight of the night. Not without backup. Halle turned toward her car, her heels crunching against gravel. The black sedan still sat half hidden in the shadows, exactly where she'd left it. She popped the trunk with a soft click and slid the briefcase inside, covering it beneath a dark cloth. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the case for half a second longer than necessary. There were names inside. Money trails. Secrets. She could feel them pressing through the leather, pulsing beneath her fingertips like a heartbeat. A part of her wanted to rip it open right there on the side of the road, to crack the locks and see exactly what Daniels had been so desperate to hide. But she knew better. The moment she opened it, the clock would start ticking. Every name inside would become a target. Every document a death warrant. She needed a secure location. Halle slammed the trunk shut, her spine straightening against the night. A gust of wind curled around her, carrying the faint scent of rain and gasoline. The weight of what she'd just done began to settle, the kind of decision that couldn't be undone. One dirty cop down. An entire network left to burn. Her phone buzzed against her hip, breaking the silence. She flicked it open, the blue glow casting shadows against her face. Unknown number. Her heart ticked faster. Only 3 people had this number. And none of them would be calling this late. She answered without hesitation. "This is Berry." Beat of silence. Then a man's voice, low, gravel-cut, threaded through the line. "You have it." Halle's grip tightened around the phone. "I have it." Another pause, longer this time. "You need to move." Halle's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "I know. They're already looking for him. By morning they'll know he's in custody. You don't have time to wait." "I never do." The line went dead. Halle closed her eyes, letting the static hum against her ear for half a second longer before lowering the phone. The call had been brief, just enough to deliver the warning without leaving a trail. They were watching. They always were. Her fingers curled around the burner phone, snapping the SIM card out with practiced ease. She crushed it beneath her boot, grinding the plastic into the dirt. The first rule of staying ahead was never leaving a trace, not even a whisper. Halle climbed into the driver's seat, the leather creaking beneath her weight. The highway stretched empty before her, endless and dark. She keyed the ignition, the engine humming to life beneath her fingers. Her mind was already calculating the route. Safe house first, briefcase locked down. Then she'd make the call. The one name on her list who could still be trusted. The one man who knew exactly how deep this went, because he'd been hunting the same ghosts for longer than she had. The name flickered through her mind like a shadow. Agent Marcus Cole. Halle's foot pressed down on the gas, the car gliding into the night. The headlights carved through the dark, sweeping over empty road signs and forgotten miles. She drove without music, without distraction, just the steady thrum of the engine and the distant whisper of what was still coming. Daniels had been sloppy, too arrogant to cover his tracks. But the men above him, the ones pulling the strings from glass offices and country clubs, they wouldn't make the same mistake. By sunrise, they'd know she had the briefcase. By noon they'd be coming for her. Halle's fingers flexed on the wheel, the adrenaline simmering just beneath her calm exterior. Let them come. She'd been waiting for this fight her whole damn life. The safe house was buried 30 miles outside the city, an abandoned hunting cabin tucked between thick pine and forgotten dirt roads. Halle killed the headlights half a mile out, guiding the car the rest of the way by memory alone. The tires crunched softly over gravel as she pulled up beside the rusted fence. No cameras, no neighbors, no trail. Perfect. She popped the trunk, fingers tightening around the briefcase handle once more. The weight of it felt heavier now. Not just metal and paper but lives. Futures. Blood. Halle carried it inside, the door creaking on its hinges as she crossed into the dark. Dust hung in the air, thick and still. The cabin smelled like old wood and rain, a forgotten place in a world that had long since moved on. She set the briefcase on the scarred kitchen table and finally, flicked the latches open. The lid creaked back. Inside, neatly organized beneath leather straps, was everything she'd been chasing for the last 6 months. Bank transfers, shell companies, payoff logs, dozens of them, judges, businessmen, a network stretching further than she'd ever imagined. Halle's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just corruption. This was organized. This was bigger than Daniels. Bigger than her. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She stared at the screen for half a second before answering. "You were right," she said quietly. The same gravel-cut voice threaded through the line. "I usually am." Halle's fingers hovered over the pages, her pulse thudding beneath her skin. "They're not just buying cops," she murmured. "They're buying cities." The silence stretched. Then the voice answered, low and steady. "Welcome to the war, Agent Berry." Halle's gaze flicked toward the window, the shadows stretching long beneath the first sliver of dawn. Her heart was steady. Her mind was sharp. They were already looking for her. Let them. By the time they found her, She'd have enough proof to burn their whole damn empire to the ground. The line went dead. Halle closed the briefcase, locking it tight. The war had already begun. And this time she was the one pulling the strings. The pale light of dawn spilled through the cracked blinds, casting jagged lines across the scarred wooden table. Halle sat in the middle of the small kitchen, the briefcase sealed shut before her. The air hung thick with the weight of what she'd found, what she'd stolen. The documents inside weren't just evidence. They were a death sentence for anyone whose name was printed on those pages. Her fingers drummed lightly against the briefcase's lid, her mind cutting through every possibility. By now, Daniels would be in a holding cell, sweating, shaking, trying to piece together how he'd let it all slip through his fingers. But he wouldn't talk. Not yet. Men like Daniels clung to the illusion of power even as the walls closed in around them. Halle's eyes flicked toward the window. The forest stretched out in endless waves of green and gray, cloaking the cabin in silence. No movement, no shadows. But she knew better than to trust the quiet. They were out there, watching, waiting. Her burner phone buzzed against the table. One message. Keep moving. They're coming. Halle's heart clenched, but her face remained calm. Marcus. He was always 2 steps ahead, just like she'd taught him. He wouldn't have sent that message unless the heat was already closing in. Her fingers ghosted over the edge of the briefcase. She should have been scared. Any sane person would be. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not now. Not with everything she had tucked away beneath layers of leather and steel. Instead, a slow burn ignited in her chest, the same fire that had carried her through every sting operation, every sleepless night spent buried in files and redacted reports. They thought they'd buried the truth under paperwork and bodies. They'd forgotten who they were dealing with. Halle pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the worn floorboards. She moved on instinct, checking the windows, locking the doors, testing the boards beneath her feet for any give. The cabin was secure. For now. The briefcase never left her sight. She knelt by the wood stove, prying open the loose panel hidden behind the rusted pipe. The space was small, barely big enough for the briefcase, but it would buy her time. She slid the case inside, sealing the panel shut just as headlights flicked across the treetops in the distance. Her heart thudded once. Then she moved. The gun was in her hand before she even realized she'd drawn it, a sleek Glock 19 tucked beneath the waistband of her jeans. She flattened herself against the wall, breath steady, every muscle coiled. The headlights crept closer, winding along the dirt road. Not Marcus. Someone else. The car rolled to a stop at the edge of the clearing. Black sedan. Tinted windows. 2 men inside. Halle could see their silhouettes shifting behind the glass. Deliberate, practiced. Hired muscle. She'd rattled the wrong cage. The engine cut out, leaving nothing but the hush of wind through the trees. The men didn't get out right away. They were waiting, trying to flush her out. Halle's finger hovered near the trigger. 2 men. Maybe 3. She could take them. But not without giving away her position. The seconds stretched long and thin. Sweat beaded at the nape of her neck. Her heartbeat slowed, matching the rhythm of the distant birdsong. Calm, steady, patient. They were underestimating her. But the driver's door opened first. Slow, deliberate. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with a gun resting low against his hip. His eyes swept the cabin, scanning every window, every shadow. "Agent Berry," he called, his voice smooth, practiced. "We know you're in there." Halle didn't move. "Why don't we talk?" the man continued, pacing toward the porch. "No need to make this harder than it has to be." Halle's eyes flicked to the second man still in the car. Leaner, faster. He was the real threat. The muscle was just a distraction. "Come on now." The man on the porch smiled, showing perfect white teeth. "We just want to have a conversation." Halle's grip tightened on the gun. Conversation. That's what they always called it right before they put a bullet in your skull. The man took another step closer. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," he drawled. Hand it over and we'll walk away. No harm, no foul. Liar. Halle's mind worked fast, mapping out the angles, the exits, the time it would take to get from here to the car. Too risky. She needed a distraction. Her gaze flicked toward the rusted propane tank leaning against the far wall. That would do. Without a sound, she slipped back into the kitchen, grabbing the half-empty bottle of whiskey from the shelf. She poured a thin stream along the windowsill, the sharp scent cutting through the stale air. The man on the porch kept talking, his voice honey-smooth. "We know you don't want to die out here, Agent Berry." Halle struck a match. "Neither do you," she murmured. The flame kissed the alcohol, flaring bright against the glass. It caught in an instant, rushing up the frame in a burst of orange and blue. The man cursed, stumbling back from the porch. Halle was already moving. She slipped through the back door, boots silent against the dirt. The gun stayed steady in her grip, heart hammering in her ears. She circled wide through the trees, her breath shallow, every nerve on edge. The lean man was out of the car now, moving fast. Too fast. Trained. He wouldn't hesitate. Neither would she. The shot cracked through the forest, sharp, clean. The lean man crumpled without a sound, blood pooling beneath his chest. One down. The broad-shouldered man spun toward the sound, drawing his gun. Too slow. Halle's bullet caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped hard against the dirt, gasping. Halle was on him in seconds, pressing the barrel against his temple. His eyes widened, fear flickering beneath the bravado. "You don't know what you're doing," he rasped. Halle leaned in close, her breath hot against his ear. "I know exactly what I'm doing." His pulse thundered beneath the barrel. "Who sent you?" The man gritted his teeth, pain flashing across his face. "You already know." Halle's jaw clenched. Course she knew. Victor Russo. The name had been buried deep in the files, half myth, half shadow. The man pulling the strings behind every dirty cop and missing witness from here to Chicago. She hadn't expected to flush him out this early. But now that she had, she'd burn him to the ground. Halle pressed harder, the gun digging into bone. "Tell Russo I'm coming." The man's breath hitched. "You won't live long enough." Halle's smile was razor-thin. "Neither will he." She pulled the trigger. The forest swallowed the sound. Halle stood in the silence, the bodies cooling at her feet. She wiped the gun clean against her sleeve and slipped it back beneath her waistband. No one would ever find them. By the time the sun rose, she'd be gone. Only the fire would remain, burning everything she'd left behind. And when the flames died, the war would be waiting. Halle turned back toward the cabin, her mind already 3 steps ahead. The briefcase. Names. Victor Russo. She was just getting started. The scent of burning wood hung heavy in the early morning air, smoke curling from the cabin's scorched window frames. Halle stood at the tree line, her chest rising and falling with measured breaths. The fire had done its job, erasing every trace of her presence, every fingerprint, every bloodstain. The bodies would burn with the rest of it. By the time anyone found this place, there'd be nothing left but ashes. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, the weight of the briefcase digging into her shoulder. The night had been long, but she couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Marcus's warning still echoed in her ears. "Keep moving. They're coming." Halle's mind flicked through the names in the briefcase. Cops, judges, politicians. Men who'd built empires on the backs of people like her. Victor Russo sat at the top of the pile, pulling strings from behind mahogany desks and bulletproof glass. He was the kind of man who'd kill his own mother if she knew too much. She hadn't planned on making a move on him this early. But the game had changed. Halle's fingers tightened around the strap, her eyes scanning the dense wall of trees. The forest stretched out in every direction, shadows shifting beneath the pale light. She needed a car. Clean one. The sedan she'd driven here would already be flagged by now. Her mind worked through the map, calculating routes and burn phones stashed along the way. There was a small town 10 miles north, one gas station, one diner, and a payphone that hadn't been ripped out yet. If she could make it there without being seen, she could call Marcus. Her boots crunched against the underbrush as she moved deeper into the trees. Every sound felt louder in the hush of dawn, the rustle of leaves, the distant crack of branches. Her pulse stayed steady, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed against the back of her neck. They were out there. They always were. By the time she reached the highway, the sun had clawed its way above the treetops, painting the asphalt in streaks of gold and gray. Halle crouched low in the shadows, scanning the empty road. Nothing but silence and heat shimmering off the pavement. She waited. Minutes stretched thin. Then she heard it, the low growl of an engine winding through the hills. Halle shifted, her fingers brushing the grip of her gun. A battered pickup truck crested the hill, its paint sun-bleached and peeling. The driver was alone, a cigarette dangling from his lips, eyes half-lidded behind mirrored sunglasses. Perfect. Halle stepped out onto the shoulder, raising one hand. The truck slowed, tires crunching against gravel. "You need a ride," the driver called, his voice thick with smoke and suspicion. Halle forced a smile, letting a hint of vulnerability slip into her expression. Car broke down a few miles back. The man's eyes flicked down the road, then back to her. He was weighing the risk, trying to decide if she was worth the trouble. "Where you headed?" "Town." Long pause. Then he nodded, jerking his thumb toward the passenger seat. "Hop in." Halle climbed into the truck, her muscles coiled beneath her calm exterior. The cab smelled like stale tobacco and cheap coffee. The driver kept one hand on the wheel, the other wrapped around the cigarette. "You ain't from around here," he muttered. Halle's smile didn't waver. "Just passing through." The truck rattled down the highway, the silence stretching between them. Halle kept her eyes on the road, every sign and mile marker etched into her memory. The gas station would be coming up soon, just a small patch of cracked asphalt and flickering neon tucked against the edge of town. "What's in the bag?" the driver asked, his eyes flicking toward the duffel slung across her chest. Halle's fingers tightened around the strap. "Clothes." The man's mouth twitched, amusement flickering behind his sunglasses. "Right." They drove the next few miles in silence. When the gas station finally came into view, Halle's pulse quickened. The parking lot was half empty, just a rusted station wagon and a beat-up motorcycle leaning against the side of the building. "Good enough." "Appreciate the ride," she murmured as the truck rolled to a stop. The driver grunted, barely sparing her a glance. Halle climbed out, her boots hitting the pavement. She moved fast, crossing the lot in long measured strides. The payphone stood against the wall, its metal frame streaked with rust. She fed the machine 2 quarters, punching in the number from memory. Rang twice. Then Marcus's voice cut through the static. "Yeah. It's me. Oz. You okay?" Halle's eyes flicked toward the road, scanning every car that passed. "For now." "Where are you?" "North. Small town. About an hour out." Another pause. "Russo." "He's moving faster than we thought." A long breath crackled through the line. "You have the briefcase." "Yeah." "What's inside?" Halle's fingers curled around the receiver. "Everything." The silence stretched. "All right," Marcus said finally. "Listen to me. There's a motel off Route 16, Shady Pines. Room 11. I'll be there in 3 hours." Halle's pulse ticked faster. "You sure it's clean?" Marcus's voice dropped low. "It's the only place that is." Halle glanced over her shoulder, every nerve on edge. "I'll be there." She hung up, the receiver clattering against the metal. 3 hours. It wasn't long. But in this game 3 hours could feel like a lifetime. Halle crossed the lot, slipping into the gas station's bathroom. She locked the door behind her, setting the duffel down on the cracked porcelain sink. The mirror above it was smeared and yellowed, her reflection barely visible. She peeled off her jacket, revealing the sweat-soaked tank top beneath. Dark smudges rimmed her eyes, her hair tangled and wild. The woman staring back at her didn't look like an agent. She looked like someone on the run. Halle splashed cold water on her face, forcing her mind to steady. One step at a time. Secure the briefcase. Meet Marcus. Take down Russo. She could feel the walls closing in, the weight of the names inside that case pressing harder against her chest. Men like Russo thought they owned the world. They bought cops, buried witnesses, and played God behind tinted glass. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated her. Halle wiped her face dry, her eyes hard in the flickering light. By the time this was over, every name in that briefcase would burn. And she'd be the one lighting the match. She slung the duffel back over her shoulder, unlocking the door. The war had already begun. Now was time to finish it. Halle stepped out of the gas station bathroom, the duffel bag slung tightly across her shoulder. The morning heat was starting to rise, baking the cracked asphalt beneath her boots. Sweat clung to the back of her neck, but she barely noticed. Her mind was locked on one thing: getting to Shady Pines without leaving a trace. The station wagon was still parked at the far end of the lot, its engine off, the windows rolled down. Halle's eyes flicked toward the diner across the road. Two old men sat on the porch, nursing coffee and swapping stories. They didn't look twice at her. But the battered pickup that had brought her here was already pulling away, trailing dust down the highway. No witnesses. No loose ends. Halle crossed the lot, her steps measured, head down. The briefcase inside the duffel felt heavier with every mile she put behind her, like it knew how many lives were tied to the secrets inside. She slipped into the station, grabbing a bottle of water and a pack of gum from the shelf. The cashier barely glanced at her, more interested in the flickering TV mounted on the wall. "That all?" he muttered. Halle nodded, sliding a crumpled bill across the counter. "Yeah." The man made change without looking, eyes fixed on the news report playing above his head. Halle's pulse quickened when she caught the headline. 2 men found dead in cabin fire. Suspected arson. Investigation ongoing. They were already spinning the story. Halle pocketed her change, forcing herself to breathe slow. They wouldn't connect it to her. Not yet. But Russo would. He always did. The payphone at the edge of the lot was still warm from her call. Marcus would be on his way now, cutting back roads and changing cars, just like she taught him. 3 hours. If everything went right, they'd be long gone before anyone picked up her trail. If everything went right. Halle stepped back into the sunlight, her eyes scanning the road. The highway stretched empty in both directions, nothing but dust and heat. She walked toward the station wagon, her heart steady, fingers wrapped around the stolen keys in her pocket. No alarms, no cameras, just an old car with a full tank of gas. She slid into the driver's seat, turning the key without hesitation. The engine sputtered, then caught. The low rumble vibrated through the frame, blending into the hush of the morning. Halle pulled onto the highway, the cracked asphalt stretching out before her. The duffel sat on the passenger seat, the weight of the briefcase pressing against her thigh. Every mile felt like a countdown. Every shadow in the rearview mirror a threat. She kept her speed steady, hands loose on the wheel. The radio crackled to life, country music spilling through the speakers. Halle let it play, white noise against the silence gnawing at her edges. Her mind raced through the names in the briefcase. Judges, cops, senators. Men who'd built their lives on blood money and silence. Men who thought they were untouchable. Russo's name sat at the top of the list, scrawled in Marcus's tight, angry handwriting. Halle's jaw clenched. He'd buried too many bodies, bought too many cops. But everyone had a weakness, even him. The highway rolled out in long, sun-baked stretches, broken only by the occasional gas station or diner. Halle kept driving, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few minutes. No tails. Not yet. The Shady Pines motel rose out of the heat like something forgotten, faded neon flickering against the cloudless sky. A handful of cars sat scattered across the lot, windows tinted, license plates half obscured by dust. Marcus had picked it for a reason. Push only. No questions. Halle pulled into a spot near the far edge, the engine ticking as it cooled. She scanned the lot, counting faces, mapping exits. 2 men smoking by the vending machines. A woman hanging laundry from the second-floor railing. No cops. Not yet. Halle grabbed the duffel, slinging it over her shoulder. Her gun rested cold against the small of her back, hidden beneath her jacket. The weight of it was familiar, comforting. She crossed the lot without looking back, her boots scuffing against the cracked pavement. Room 11 sat at the far end, half hidden beneath peeling paint and shadows. Halle knocked once, sharp, deliberate. The lock clicked. Marcus opened the door, eyes bloodshot, one hand tucked beneath his jacket. He stepped aside without a word, letting her slip inside. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap whiskey. The curtains were drawn tight, slivers of sunlight bleeding through the gaps. A single lamp flickered on the nightstand, casting long shadows against the cracked wallpaper. Halle dropped the duffel onto the bed. Marcus locked the door behind her, sliding the deadbolt into place. "You good?" he asked, voice low. Halle nodded, peeling off her jacket. "For now." Marcus's eyes flicked to the bag. "You got it." Halle unzipped the duffel, pulling out the briefcase. The leather was scuffed, the brass lock scratched and dented. But the weight of it hadn't changed. Marcus's breath caught. "You opened it." Halle's fingers traced the edge of the case. "Enough to know we're not walking away from this clean." Marcus sank onto the bed, rubbing a hand over his face. "How bad?" Halle's eyes stayed locked on the case. "Russo bad." Marcus cursed under his breath. They both knew what that meant. Russo had cops in his pocket from here to Chicago. Judges, prosecutors, anyone who could be bought or buried. And now they had the proof. Wire transfers. Enough to burn Russo's empire to the ground. If they lived long enough to use it. Marcus leaned back against the headboard, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "They're gonna come hard, Halle." Halle's mouth twisted. "Let 'em." Marcus glanced at her, something flickering behind his tired eyes. "You always this crazy." Halle's smile was razor-thin. "You know I am." They sat in silence, the weight of what they'd stolen pressing down on both of them. The walls felt too thin, the air too still. Outside the world kept turning. Inside the clock was already ticking. 3 hours. Maybe less. Halle leaned forward, her voice low. "We hit him first, Marcus. Before he knows we're coming." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You got a plan." Halle's smile sharpened. "I always have a plan." The night was closing in. By the time the sun rose, Russo would know her name. And he wouldn't live long enough to forget it. Halle sat on the edge of the motel bed, her fingers tracing the rough leather of the briefcase. The room's dim light flickered in the cracked mirror, casting jagged shadows across the peeling walls. The silence between her and Marcus stretched thick, the kind that carried the weight of everything unspoken. Marcus paced near the window, the barrel of his pistol flashing beneath his jacket with every step. His eyes flicked between the drawn blinds and the door, his fingers tapping against his thigh. He hadn't stopped moving since she'd walked in. Halle finally broke the silence. "We don't have much time." Marcus's pacing slowed, but the tension in his shoulders stayed locked tight. He turned toward her, eyes bloodshot and hollow. "How do you want to play this?" Halle's fingers tightened around the edge of the briefcase. The plan was already forming in her head, a dozen moving pieces clicking into place. Russo's network stretched wider than they'd ever realized. The briefcase hadn't just confirmed the names, they'd uncovered entire payment schedules, drop locations, offshore accounts. It was bigger than they'd thought. Bigger than anyone would believe without the proof in her hands. "We cut the head off first," Halle said, her voice low. "Russo goes down tonight." Marcus's eyes narrowed. His pacing stopped. "You serious?" Halle leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. You think we're gonna live long enough to build a case? Russo's already cleaning house. Every name in this case is a loose end waiting to be tied off. We hit him now, or we die with the rest of them. Marcus's jaw worked, the lines carved into his face deepening. He'd always been the cautious one, the one who weighed every angle before making a move. But caution wouldn't save them now. You know what happens if we miss, he muttered. Halle's gaze sharpened. We won't. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, the motel room closing in around them. Finally he nodded once, short and grim. All right. How? Halle's mind moved fast, piecing the plan together like shards of glass. Russo wouldn't be hiding, not yet. He'd still feel untouchable, still think he had time to bury the evidence before anyone came knocking. That arrogance would be his blind spot. He keeps a private office at the Riverfront Club. 3rd floor back hallway. No cameras. No guards after midnight. Her eyes locked on Marcus. That's where we hit him. Marcus's brow furrowed. How the hell do you know that? Halle's smile was razor sharp. Because that's where he used to meet his snitches. And one of them owed me a favor. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the briefcase, suspicion flickering behind the exhaustion. You played this close to the chest. Halle's fingers tapped against the case. You think I'd drag you into this without a plan? Marcus's breath hissed out between his teeth. He checked his gun again, the metallic snap echoing through the small room. We walk in there, we're not walking out unless he's dead. Halle's smile didn't waver. That's the point. The night stretched long and heavy as they prepped, stripping down their gear, wiping serial numbers, loading fresh mags. Marcus laid out maps of the Riverfront Club, marking entrances and exits with a stolen pen. Halle kept one eye on the clock. Russo would already know about the cabin by now. His men would be hunting. They had one shot, one window, before the whole city locked down around them. By the time midnight rolled around, the motel room was stripped bare. No fingerprints, no shell casings, just 2 loaded guns, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, and a briefcase full of names that could burn the world down. Halle tucked the gun into her waistband, the cold weight settling against the small of her back. You ready? Marcus's eyes flicked toward the door. No. Halle's smile was thin. Good. They slipped out of the motel room one at a time, blending into the shadows at the edge of the lot. The night air hung thick, heat pressing against their skin. The car they'd stolen sat waiting down the street, hot-wired, untraceable. Halle slid behind the wheel, her hands steady on the grip. Marcus climbed in without a word. The drive to the Riverfront Club passed in tense silence. The city's lights flickered on the horizon, neon signs bleeding into the darkness. Every intersection felt heavier, every set of headlights a threat. By the time they pulled onto the narrow back street behind the club, the adrenaline was singing in Halle's blood. She killed the engine. No alarms, no patrols. Just the low thump of music vibrating through the walls. Marcus checked his gun one last time. You sure about this? Halle's eyes stayed locked on the rear entrance. No. Marcus grunted. Good. They moved fast, slipping through the shadows toward the service door. Halle's lockpicks worked quick, the old tumblers clicking beneath her fingers. The door swung open into a narrow hallway, dimly lit, the air heavy with stale smoke and spilled whiskey. Halle's pulse stayed steady. They followed the hallway deeper, past locked storage rooms and empty kitchens. The club's music throbbed through the walls, loud enough to cover footsteps. The corridor stretched out ahead of them, empty and silent. 3rd floor. Back hallway. No cameras. Halle's mind ticked through the plan with every step. They reached the stairwell, the metal door yawning open into stale darkness. Marcus took point, his gun sweeping the corners as they climbed. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, the club's noise had faded to a distant hum. The hallway stretched out before them, dimly lit, lined with closed doors. One of them led to Russo. Halle's heart kicked faster. Marcus nodded toward the last door on the right. This is your play. Halle stepped forward, her fingers tightening around the grip of her gun. The lock was old simple. She cracked it in seconds, easing the door open just enough to see inside. The office was dark, shadows pooling across the hardwood floor. Me. Halle slipped inside, Marcus at her back. The air smelled of leather and stale cigars. Papers cluttered the desk. Ledgers, burner phones, stacks of cash. But no Russo. Halle's stomach twisted. Too easy. Too clean. Then the door clicked shut behind them. Halle spun, her gun snapping up. Russo stepped out of the shadows, flanked by two men in black suits. His silver hair gleamed beneath the low lamplight. His smile slow and poisonous. "Well, well," he drawled. "I was wondering when you'd come knocking." Halle's finger tensed on the trigger, her breath locked in her chest. Russo's smile widened. "You think I built all this without knowing how the game ends?" Marcus's gun tracked toward the nearest guard, his knuckles white against the grip. Halle's heart hammered against her ribs. They were trapped, and Russo knew it. But he didn't know everything. Not yet. Halle's smile was slow, razor-sharp beneath the fear clawing at her throat. "You always did underestimate me, Victor." Russo's grin flickered, just for a second. Long enough. Halle moved first. Halle's heart pounded in her chest, every second stretching into an eternity. Her finger curled around the trigger, eyes locked on Russo's smirking face. The two guards flanking him stiffened, their hands inching toward their holsters. Marcus's breath came slow and steady beside her, the barrel of his gun tracking the nearest thug. One wrong move and the room would explode into gunfire. Halle's mind raced, calculating every angle, every outcome. Russo's smile never wavered. "You really think you're walking out of here alive, sweetheart?" His voice was silk wrapped around a blade. "You should have stayed buried." Halle's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Russo's eyes flicked toward the briefcase dangling from her shoulder. That flicker, barely half a second, told Halle everything she needed to know. He was afraid. Beneath the bravado, beneath the tailored suit and cold smile, Victor Russo was scared. But Halle shifted, her grip tightening. Every muscle in her body coiled, ready to strike. "You want the case, Victor," she drawled, buying herself another precious second. "Come take it." Russo's smile faltered just a hair. His hand twitched at his side. Halle moved. Her gun snapped up, 2 shots ripping through the silence. The first guard's head jerked back, blood spraying across the wall. The second lunged for his weapon, too slow. Marcus's gun barked once. The man crumpled. Russo stumbled back, his polished shoes slipping in the spreading pool of blood. His hand went for the pistol beneath his jacket, but Halle was already on him, crossing the room in 2 strides. The barrel of her Glock pressed against his temple. "Don't," she warned, her voice low and lethal. Russo froze, his breath ragged. Sweat slicked his forehead, the mask of confidence cracking. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. Halle's heart slammed against her ribs, but her hand stayed steady. "No, Victor," she whispered. "I'm fixing one." The room stank of gunpowder and copper. Marcus stood watch by the door, his gun trained on the hallway. They didn't have long. Any second now, someone would hear the shots. Halle leaned in closer, her breath hot against Russo's ear. "You've been buying judges, cops, burying people for years. You thought you could bleed this city dry forever." Her eyes flicked toward the briefcase. "But your insurance policy's sitting in my hands now. Every name, every bribe, every body you ever buried." Russo's face paled, his breath quickening. "You don't know what you're playing with," he snarled. Halle's smile sharpened. "Funny. Neither do you." She slammed the butt of her gun against his temple. Russo crumpled, his body hitting the floor with a dull thud. Marcus's voice cut through the thick silence. "We gotta go. Now." Halle nodded, breathless. Her pulse was a drum in her ears. She crouched, flipping open the briefcase. The stacks of cash and documents were still inside, untouched. The last thread holding Russo's empire together. Her fingers brushed over the papers. Names, dates, account numbers. The kind of proof that could crack the whole rotten city wide open. But they weren't out yet. Halle stuffed the papers into her jacket, kicking the briefcase across the floor. "Leave it," she muttered. "Let him think we took the money." Marcus's eyes flicked toward the slumped bodies. "They're gonna come after us." Halle's smile was razor-thin. "Let him." They slipped out of the office, moving like shadows through the darkened hallway. The club's music still throbbed beneath their feet, oblivious to the blood cooling upstairs. By the time they reached the stairwell, Halle's lungs were burning. Every creak of the floorboards, every flickering light felt like an alarm ready to go off. They hit the alley door at a dead run, bursting out into the heavy night air. Marcus yanked the car keys from his pocket. Where to? Halle's mind raced. Russo's men would be combing the city by sunrise. The cops would be in his pocket. Every checkpoint, every camera. They had one chance. Cross the state line. "We go north." Marcus's mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. The engine roared to life, tires screeching against the cracked pavement. Halle glanced back at the club, its neon lights flickering behind them. Russo would wake up. He'd come for her. But when he did, when the whole city came down on top of him, she'd be long gone. The briefcase's secrets were already burning through her mind. Names of men who thought they were untouchable. Men who'd built their lives on silence and fear. By the time she was done, they'd all fall. One by one. Marcus's voice cut through the hum of the tires. "You really think we can pull this off?" Halle's smile was cold, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We don't have to pull it off, Marcus." She glanced at the papers tucked beneath her jacket. "We just have to survive long enough to watch them burn." The city lights faded behind them, swallowed by the endless stretch of highway. The war had only just begun. The engine hummed beneath Halle's hands, the rhythmic vibration barely masking the storm raging inside her chest. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, black asphalt swallowing the car's headlights. The distant glow of the city flickered in the rearview mirror, growing smaller with every mile. Marcus sat rigid in the passenger seat, his fingers drumming against the grip of his gun. He hadn't spoken since they'd hit the road, but Halle could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. Every glance he stole toward her carried the same unspoken question. What now? Halle's mind raced, sifting through the puzzle pieces they'd stolen from Russo's empire. Offshore accounts. It was enough to burn the whole operation to the ground, but only if they lived long enough to use it. The problem was, they wouldn't be the only ones playing with matches. "You need to rest." Marcus's voice was low, breaking the heavy silence. Halle's grip on the wheel tightened. "I'll rest when we're safe." Marcus's eyes flicked toward the window, scanning the dark horizon. "Safe's a long way off." Halle's chest squeezed. He was right. Russo's men would be crawling the city by now. Phone lines buzzing, checkpoints popping up like weeds. They'd be hunting her Marcus
the way
nodded,
they always had.
fishing the cheap
Only
prepaid
this time
phone
she
from his
wasn't
jacket
running.
pocket.
She was bait.
Halle snatched
The
it from his
thought sent
hand,
a cold
her
thrill
fingers
through her
flying
veins.
over the keypad.
"You still got
There
that
was only
burner?"
one number she
asked,
needed,
eyes locked
buried
on the road.
deep in her memory, the last lifeline she hadn't burned. The line rang once. On the third ring, a voice crackled through the static. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Halle's heart clenched at the sound. Smooth, slow, with just enough gravel to scrape against old scars. Agent Monroe. Her last partner before everything went to hell. "Glad you're still answering your phone, old man." A low chuckle echoed through the line. "Figured you'd be calling sooner or later. What trouble you stirring up now?" Halle's fingers tapped against the wheel, her mind already calculating. "I've got a package. Names, accounts. Everything tying Russo's network to half the brass in the city." Monroe's breath caught. A subtle hitch, barely there. "You serious?" "Dead serious." A long pause stretched between them. Halle could almost hear the gears turning on the other end. Monroe weighing his options, measuring just how deep the rabbit hole went. "You got proof?" Halle's eyes flicked toward the papers stuffed beneath her jacket. "I got more proof than you know what to do with." Another pause. Then Monroe's voice dropped, quieter now. "Where are you?" Halle's pulse quickened. "Out of state. For now." "Smart. Stay that way." The line crackled. Then Monroe's tone hardened. "But if you're playing this game, you know how it ends." Halle's stomach twisted. "I know. You need to disappear, Berry. Walk away while you still can." Halle's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, her breath catching in her throat. "I can't." The silence on the other end stretched long and heavy. Finally Monroe sighed, a slow, resigned sound. "All right. I'll see what strings I can pull. But you come back across that state line, you're on your own." Halle's heart thudded hard against her ribs. "I was always on my own." The line went dead. Halle dropped the burner onto the dashboard, her chest tight. Marcus's eyes stayed fixed on her, suspicion flickering behind the exhaustion. "Who was that?" Halle stared straight ahead, her voice steady. "Insurance." Marcus's jaw clenched, but he didn't press. "Not yet." The night stretched on, the highway swallowing the miles. The glow of distant towns blurred past, neon signs flickering against the black horizon. Every passing set of headlights felt like a loaded gun pressed against her back. By the time they pulled into the rundown motel off the highway, dawn was creeping over the hills, pale and merciless. Halle killed the engine, the sudden silence ringing in her ears. Marcus scanned the empty lot, his fingers twitching near his gun. "You really think this place is clean?" Halle's smile was sharp, humorless. "Clean enough." They slipped inside, locking the door behind them. The room stank of stale smoke and cheap disinfectant. Paint peeled from the walls, and the bed sagged beneath threadbare sheets. It was perfect. Marcus dropped his bag on the floor, his body slumping into the battered chair by the window. Halle moved straight to the desk, spreading the stolen documents across the scarred surface. Names spilled out in black ink. Judges, cops, politicians. Half the city's power structure tied to Russo's payroll. It was everything she'd ever needed. And it would get them both killed. Marcus's voice cut through the heavy silence. "You really think Monroe's gonna help?" Halle's fingers froze. "No." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Then why call him?" Halle's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because now Russo thinks I did." The pieces were moving, faster than she could control. Monroe would spread the word through whatever channels he had left. By nightfall, half the city would know she was holding the detonator. It would flush Russo out, force him into the open. It would also paint a target on her back the size of the damn skyline. Marcus's mouth pressed into a hard line. "This is a suicide mission." Halle's eyes stayed locked on the papers. "Not if we move first." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus leaned back in the chair, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You always were a stubborn bitch." Halle's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile she'd managed in days. "You always were slow to keep up." The tension broke, just for a second, before the weight of what lay ahead settled back between them. By nightfall, the whole city would be hunting them. Russo would come. The cops. The feds. Everyone with a price on their soul. But Halle had never been one to run. She was tired of running. The storm was coming. And this time, she was ready to meet it head-on. Marcus's voice broke the silence again. Soft, almost reluctant. "What if we don't make it?" Halle's eyes stayed fixed on the papers. "We make sure Russo doesn't either." The sun crept higher, bleeding pale gold across the cracked motel walls. By nightfall the war would begin. And by morning, one of them would be buried. The sun dipped low against the jagged skyline, bleeding crimson into the horizon. Halle sat on the edge of the stained motel bed, her Glock stripped and laid out in pieces across her lap. The rhythmic click of metal against metal echoed through the room as her fingers worked. Steady, mechanical. Marcus leaned against the wall by the window, his gaze fixed on the parking lot below. His gun rested loose in his grip, but his eyes stayed sharp, tracking every flicker of movement beyond the cracked blinds. Time was running out. They both knew it. "You sure about this?" Marcus's voice was low, barely cutting through the weight in the room. Halle didn't look up. "I've never been sure about anything in my life." Marcus huffed out something between a laugh and a sigh. "That's what worries me." Halle snapped the slide back into place, the metal locking tight beneath her fingers. She glanced toward the scattered papers on the desk, the list of names that could set the whole city on fire. Victor Russo, Chief Rollins, Judge Delgado. They were all there. Every man who thought he owned this city, carved out in black ink. "Russo's gonna be at the docks tonight." Halle's voice was steady, but the weight beneath it pressed hard against her ribs. "Midnight shipment. Last one before he goes underground." Marcus's jaw clenched. "You sure?" Halle's eyes flicked toward the burner phone still resting on the nightstand, the one she'd used to call Monroe. "I'm sure." Marcus shifted, his knuckles tightening around the grip of his pistol. "You really think Monroe's gonna let you walk away from this?" Halle's mouth curved, sharp and humorless. No. Monroe had always been the last card in her deck, the one man who might break just enough rules to bury Russo for good. But she knew better than to trust him. The only way out of this was to finish what she started. She stood, sliding the Glock into the holster beneath her jacket. "You don't have to come," she said softly. Marcus's eyes snapped toward her, something dark flickering behind them. "Don't insult me." Halle's chest ached at the quiet anger in his voice. They'd both lost too much to turn back now. Without another word, they gathered the papers, stuffing them into Marcus's duffel bag. Every name, every secret, the whole rotten empire, wrapped up in crumpled manila folders. By the time they stepped outside, the sun had bled into darkness. The air hung heavy, thick with the weight of something about to break. The drive to the docks stretched out in tense silence, the hum of the engine filling the void between them. Halle's fingers tapped against the steering wheel, her mind spinning through every possible outcome. They could burn Russo's empire to the ground tonight, or they could die trying. By the time they reached the docks, the world had folded into shadows, steel cranes looming against the midnight sky, their rusted arms slicing through the fog. The distant echo of water lapping against the pier filled the night, masking the low murmur of voices. Halle killed the engine, her pulse a steady drum in her ears. "They'll have lookouts," Marcus murmured, checking his weapon. "Snipers, probably." Halle nodded, her eyes scanning the skeletal maze of shipping containers. "I want Russo alive." Marcus's mouth twisted. "Why?" Halle's fingers curled tighter around the grip of her gun. "Because I want him to watch it all burn." They moved through the shadows, silent, invisible. The docks stretched wide and empty, the salt air stinging against Halle's skin. They found cover behind a rusted container, the distant glow of cigarette embers flickering in the dark. 2 guards, automatic weapons. Halle's heart thudded hard in her chest. She glanced at Marcus, her voice barely a breath. "Take the one on the left." Marcus's eyes stayed locked on her. "You sure about this?" Halle's smile was razor thin. "Not even a little." Before Marcus could argue, she moved. The first guard went down without a sound, Marcus's knife slicing clean through his throat. The second had just enough time to turn before Halle's silencer coughed, the bullet snapping through his skull. They dragged the bodies into the shadows, wiping their hands clean against their clothes. One by one, they carved a path through the docks, silent and relentless. The guards fell like dominoes, their bodies swallowed by the dark. By the time they reached the warehouse, Halle's chest was heaving, sweat slick against her skin. Russo was inside. She could feel him. Marcus crouched beside her, his breath ragged. "You still got that death wish." Halle's smile was cold. It's not a death wish if you plan to survive. Marcus huffed out a breath, but there was something close to pride in his eyes. They slipped inside, the smell of salt and diesel filling the air. Crates lined the walls, guns, drugs, blood money stacked high beneath the flickering lights. At the far end of the warehouse, Russo stood with his back to them, his slicked back hair glinting beneath the buzzing fluorescence. Two men flanked him, their guns loose at their sides. Halle's fingers curled around the trigger. One shot. 1 second. It would all be over. But she wanted him to see. She stepped out of the shadows, her voice cutting through the stale air. Miss me. Russo's head snapped toward her, his face twisting in shock. For one glorious second, she saw the fear flicker behind his eyes. Then the mask slipped back into place. Barry. His voice was silk wrapped in barbed wire. Should have stayed buried. Halle's smile was pure venom. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Russo's fingers twitched toward his gun. Halle's aim never wavered. Go ahead, Victor. Her voice was steady, every word carved from steel. See how that ends for you. For a heartbeat, the whole world balanced on the edge of a knife. Then Marcus's gun snapped up, cutting down the first guard with a single shot. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the warehouse, ricocheting off steel and concrete. Halle dove behind a crate, bullets slicing through the air around her. Russo scrambled for cover, his men falling one by one beneath the hail of gunfire. By the time the echoes faded, only Russo was left, his breath ragged, his gun empty. Halle rose from the shadows, her Glock trained on his heart. This city doesn't belong to you anymore, she said softly. Russo's chest heaved, sweat slick on his brow. You think one little list is gonna change anything? Halle's smile was cold. No. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. But I am. With a single squeeze of the trigger, she ended him, quick, clean. No glory. No second chances. Just justice. By the time the sirens echoed in the distance, Halle and Marcus were already gone, slipping into the night with the whole rotten empire burning behind them. They drove in silence, the briefcase heavy between them. By morning, the names inside would be splashed across every headline in the city. The city would bleed. And for the first time in her life, Halle Berry was free. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dark, empty and wide open. She didn't look back. Not this time.